the companies that really have the best success, the exponential success, tend to have higher expectations of performance.
As a business owner, you can't get what you want without a great team to take you to the next level.
Revenues is like putting the ball in the fairway. You got to sink the putt.
As you redesign the way you think, like you want your salespeople to be on the profitability side, more so than on just straight comp.
What we're trying to do is evolve people from this little world of me to we.
Each financial decision is not in a silo by itself. It has to be looked at and how it relates to something else in your plan. And most people are not looking at the big picture.
This is John Smallwood, and we are back on Money Isn't. You know what money is, but you don't know what money isn't. And today, business owners, if you want to end the employee entitlement bullshit that goes on, okay? This conversation today with Alex Freytag, who runs a company called ProfitWorks. He's an EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System facilitator. He's been in the industry since 1996. His job, his focus is to make teams become highly productive and highly functional and to get the best results from your clients. So if you're not from your clients, but from your employees, right? If you're interested in this conversation, you should listen to the whole thing and you should subscribe and share this. Alex, welcome.
Thank you, John. Thanks. Great to be here. Appreciate this.
Smallwood Wealth Management is the lead sponsor of this podcast. You have an opportunity to have a free, no obligation conversation with one of our qualified advisors. Go to smallwoodwealth.com, schedule a call, or call us at 800-797-1000 and get on our calendars. You know, we've known each other through the strategic coach, Dan Sullivan, for, I think, 6 years now.
I think 6. I've probably been in at 8. I think maybe this is 8 or 7, but I did start going to the same session that you attended until maybe 5-6 years ago. So, yeah.
Yeah, and EOS was this like thing in my brain that was like, what is that? Like, as Dan would talk about and other companies would be talking about it. And what was interesting is I didn't really understand what it was. And, you know, sharing, you know, having a executive team, the small business never really thinks of putting together an executive team, sharing the goals, sharing the vision, and providing compensation in a way that everybody can see that vision. And I think there's a couple of things that I want to hit today, but in your book, ProfitWorks, you talk about creating incentive plans that really engage the team in understanding what profit is and how these things work. So it's not just this entitlement mindset. Then you have this latest book that you wrote, Stretch, Not Snap. And as a business owner, most of us want to stretch and snap the crap out of people because we want to go so far. And you're like, come on, people, let's go.
Exactly. Yeah. And the distinction between EOS, which is its own holistic, you know, operating system, doesn't include ProfitWorks, which is a separate entity. So I just want your listeners and to keep in mind that ProfitWorks is a separate thing, but it's relevant to EOS. And so, you know, not to blend the two or confuse anybody. But.
Right. I think as we deploy the EOS system in our firm, and in there's always like, okay, now that we have this idea, you need to go implement certain things. And you actually created ProfitWorks because there was a need that just wasn't being filled in the marketplace.
Yeah. And I kind of did it backwards. My brother and I started ProfitWorks in 96. And the idea came from our father, who was very entrepreneurial. And we live in Columbus, Ohio, and he was on advisory boards of companies, small, privately held. And a lot of the complaints that the business owners would have, and to explain to the board is like, we're doing 20 million in sales. My employees think I'm making $20 million, and I got planes and boats and houses and all this stuff. I'm barely scraping by. They were frustrated, and it was kind of this common concern. And so my dad, who was thinking maybe there's a business in teaching them to think and act like owners. And so he just kind of put that out there. And my brother Gavin and I said, well, let's do this. So we started a company and we developed some training content and so forth. And that period of time, as we were able to work with more companies and these frontline employees, oftentimes like hairstylists or even people on the manufacturing floor, or even in professional services firms, start to open their eyes like, wow, okay, so profit's like less than 10% of sales, not sales. And these are the costs. And they start to see opportunities to do things differently or talk about issues and create efficiencies and so forth. And this pot of money starts to grow that wasn't there before. And that's where the idea of an incentive plan kind of like, well, it's self-funded. The behavior of the employees has shifted. They've created money that wasn't there. And now we can reward them a little bit with the upside to try to get them to keep their heads in the game and thinking like an owner does.
Because it's sort of like, if you're a business owner and depending on what type of business, and this is going to apply to any business, right? But the idea is like, you have a contract signed and you don't collect the money, or you don't process that transaction, or you don't facilitate the order and get paid on the right time. Yes, we sold it, but we didn't get paid yet. Like, we're not profitable. And like, if you're tying compensation to like, oh, we booked the sale, but we didn't get paid. Now that's next quarter. And people are like, what do you mean it's next quarter? Yeah, it's next quarter now.
It's a good point. Because earlier you and I were talking about where do you base that formula for incentive? And some folks do look at revenues, and I kind of try to shy away from that, because revenues is like putting the ball in the fairway. You gotta sink the putt, and
got to get that second shot. You got to get the second shot. That's my biggest problem in golf.
You're right. And a lot of employees don't see the difference, which is a fairly easy thing to teach, but profit is one thing and cash is another. To your point, there's a timing issue there, because if we make the sale, we do all the work and we send the invoice, and then it's like, it's, net 30 or whatever, and it's 60, 90 days. Those kinds of conversations with the employees, they start to say, well, why don't they pay us on time? And it might be we're not being a squeaky wheel, or it might be we didn't do a good job, or it might be that whatever the reason.
It was an email that went to the wrong one, or it was in a box that nobody, somebody missed it. There was no follow-up. Oh my God, there's so many things. And I think one of the things that as EOS came in, you're basically in the book that you guys, the second book, the book that I just showed, this book, the Stretch Not Snap, that's like a sequel to another book, right? Which was the one with Gino Wickman, which is like this story of like we're successful, but we don't feel successful, or we're not making the profits that were possible of doing. And like when I look at a business, there's 8 to 10 things on that P&L that you can quickly adjust and get really good, bottom line. But conversely, you get walloped by, slow pay or higher expenses, and your profit gets destroyed. I remember a couple of years ago, we had a really good year, but our expenses were through the roof, and it just destroyed all the profit. I think we're up 15% in expenses. Boom, our profit was cut in half. And it's like, oh, wow. And I, as the business owner, you take that in the chin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting when we're teaching it, for example, if you use $1 bill or $100 bill or whatever, and you say you would say we do 5% at the bottom line, at that dollar bill, we have a nickel left over. And so, a simple P&L, sales minus expenses, is profit. And to your point, if we save $1, a full dollar goes to the bottom line. If we wanted to put $1 to the bottom line by increasing sales in a company that does 5% profit, we have to increase sales by $20 to get 5% at the bottom line. So not that you don't want to do both, because you can't just grow a company by obviously cutting costs, but getting employees to sort of think about, wow, the exponential impact of cost cutting, or just doing some things smarter or faster, better, do it right the first time. Like rework in a paving company, or those kinds of like simple things that most companies are measuring already, but getting the employees to realize like overtime and opportunity cost and use of materials and fuel and all that stuff to go out and fix something is hugely, it kills profit, right?
Right.
And if they're tied into that bottom line, they start to care, and which is a good thing. And
Yeah, save $1 in those expenses, and it's $94 as opposed to $95 of expense, and that's a 20%, increase on the bottom line. And it's like, oh, that was super powerful. But what, as a business owner and as somebody that's facilitated so many different companies and different ideas, what do you see like the top problems that people have? Like, where do companies go wrong in the way they're executing compensation? Where do they go on their growth plan? And how do they go wrong on engaging their staff in this journey?
good, that's a great question. And I'm guilty of many of the things I'm talking about. And maybe you've seen some of these things in your experience. Probably the most common concern and frustration I see is complexity. And, as a business owner, you're thinking, okay, we got to do an incentive plan or a profit sharing plan. And so we start to think, well, when these guys do this stuff over here, they'll have this incentive to get them really focused on this. And this other team over here in this other department does this. So we're going to have a little bit different incentive plan for them. And you start to create and you have to administer all that. And you got spreadsheets and tabs and formulas and, links and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, you get in front of the employees and you're trying to explain it. And it's, well, no, but there's an exception there. But you guys are different over here. So it just starts to sound like you're
bullshit.
So as a coaching firm for incentive plans, our big role that we play is to strive for simplicity. And it's easier to explain to people. It's easier for them to understand. The score at the end of the game, we always say is profit. And so we want to create a trigger or a minimum threshold. So another frustration is like the incentive just becomes an expense, which can become an entitlement for the employees. They're like,
yeah,
I did this year. I did I understand we're swearing here, so it's okay. But I did the same stuff this year I did last year. I got the bonus last year, so I should be getting it this year, and I've already spent it on a pool or whatever. And then suddenly it's like incentive, and so that whole idea of creating that plan that is simple and easy to understand and tied to the company's profitability. So I try to get in the minds, we got to protect the company first. And that means we got to account for taxes. We got to account for return on investment. You, as an entrepreneur, you understand we're taking risks, and return and risk are directly related, and all returns come from profit. And so that profit has to be there to provide a return for me as a business owner. And if it's not there, I can do something else with my money. So it's a real conversation in our capitalist society that I enjoy having. Employees are investors too, and some have 401k, some have a house, some have other types of things they've invested. So you start to relate it to personal finance, sometimes accounting for debt and debt covenants, and then reinvestment in the business. So that conversation with the business owner helps us establish what's the minimum threshold of profit this year that we need to reach before the incentive kicks in. And so protecting the company is big instead of paying it off dollar one. And so it's at risk. There's a lot of research, John, that says that motivation for people is much higher when the probability of success is 50%, meaning there's a chance of failure. If there's risk, you start to get creative and try harder. And so a threshold creates that element of it's not a sure thing. It's you don't get the incentive just for showing up. We got to earn it. And so it moves from entitlement to earning, which is really important. And so some of the things you asked about that companies might do when they're communicating it, and I'm not prescribing that you have to share all your financials, but if you kind of share how does the company keep score, and folks, you in this department, what are the key KPIs or metrics or measurables that you need to focus on that'll affect it? And you might have different ones over in this department and so forth, but help them start to see everything in their line of sight could be done a little differently, a little better, and start to engage them in the business literacy. So they start to repetitively see, okay, we're a $20 million company. Again, that's not 20 million sitting somewhere. we do 5% at the bottom, and we got to pay taxes and all this other stuff. So anyway, those types of engagement tactics, I think, are really important for the leadership team to begin to just beat the drum. Like, these guys can understand this stuff. It's not rocket science. I'm not an accountant. You can relate it to household finance. You know, the paycheck is like sales, and you pay your bills at home. And if you're not happy with what's left over, maybe you do some things differently. And so that you can sort of dip a toe in the water as an entrepreneur and help the employees begin to not feel so afraid of seeing numbers. You know, even the P&L, which is 4 or 5 pages long, just get it down to like a couple of lines.
Right. Condense to the top. To like, I'm a big fan of, like, you've got a, you know, if you're an S corp or, you know, a partnership, like, follow the way the tax return is filed. Right. And it's sort of like, you know, there's your gross sales, there's your cost of goods, there's your gross profit, there's the owner's salary front and center, right? And then there's, you know, all other salaries, and then you just keep going through that line. It's like, okay, that's how this thing gets profitable. And like, the risk level is, most people are not here for their salary as a business owner. We're here for the reward of the profit.
That's true. And I am sensitive to, because I sort of think of transparency, like financial transparency, as a continuum from like sharing nothing to sharing way too much. And so there's a balance somewhere in the middle. Like, I don't suggest sharing salaries and stuff. It might be one line says like wages.
Yeah.
You know,
You don't want the detail. Yeah. You don't want the detail. Yeah.
But there's sort of a bell curve on top of that line of productivity or performance, where if you don't share anything, you're going to have lower levels of performance. And if you share way too much, people could freak out, or they just have flooded with information. So share the information that's going to help them do the best job they can to you know, what levers do I pull that affect profit in my little world? It might be an accounting department, or it might be in sales, or it could be in operations, whatever it might be. But everybody has measurables that can be tied to their seat, and it helps them know, am I doing a good job?
Yeah, and for clarity, you're not sharing it with everybody in the organization. You're picking a strategic team that you're going to take, like, whether it's a division head or you know, a really key employee in a certain area, and they're going to get that exposure. It's not the entire organization.
That's right. The exception might be if a company's doing like a state of the company meeting, which I know Mark probably teaches this, but quarterly we suggest talking to everybody, tell them where we've been, where we are, where we're going, past, present, future. And in that forum, which could be 20 minutes or 30 minutes or something, you might share your vision, traction, organizer, right, in your strategy and the 1-year plan. And so you might share that with everybody. And a lot of companies are just putting revenues up there. And so my concern with that is, if the employees always see 20 million for the 1 year, 35 million for the 3 year, and 50 million for the 5-year target, all they're beating into their heads is there's a lot of zeros. Somebody's making a ton of money, and it's not me. So you can start to, I say, get some gross margin numbers on there, get some EBITDA or profit, net income, type numbers on there. So people see, oh yeah, that 30 million, but it's 10% profit.
Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of companies like, hey, they're $100 million company, but there's 80 million of cost of goods. And then there's, 20 million. And then there's like, you got all the staff, you got a bunch of stuff. And it's like, oh, that's not 100 million. Like, it's really 20 million. But yes, you have to file it as 100 million, but you have to keep growing this $100 million company to get that 30 million to keep popping up, or 20 million, or whatever that bottom line is. Where do you see the mistakes people make in putting together this executive team? Like, who are the right people, and how do you, is there a time frame for people to stay on, or should they come off? Should you swap it out?
Good question. So, and I'll go put my EOS hat on here. The leadership team of an entrepreneurial company, my suggestion is 3 to 7 leaders. And if you have a visionary and a separate integrator. Integrator kind of like run the day-to-day operations, visionary, more creative, and like, entrepreneurial and like industry trends and what's next and acquisitions and that kind of thing. Those two folks are sort of the yin yang of the business. And then to the integrator report, perhaps 3, 4, 5 people max. There is a lot of data on this team size that says when you have too many people, picture like the freaking United Nations, right? It's like you go in there, everybody's got a mic in front of them and there's 1,000 people in there, and like you don't know when you're gonna get the mic again. So you just like throw up, and anytime you get to speak, you just blah, blah, blah. And it's totally unproductive. So it's advocacy in a team that's too large. And what Patrick Lencioni teaches, who probably from 5 dysfunctions of a team, is that the smaller the group, you can get more inquiry. And that's where you get depth of discussion on key issues. And so 4 or 5 people, you're going to go deep on issues and get to the root. If you have too many people, there's politics and there's like introverts and all kinds of other situations that will cause the team to be less functional. So from the standpoint of size, that's one thing. Now, roles in the room, we always start as an EOS implementer with the basic assumption there's a sales and marketing or demand creation function of most any business. We got to shake the bushes and get the clients to come in. And then there's some delivery, some supply, delivering the product or the service. Supply and demand is, basic economic literacy there. And then there's a support function, which we call finance or admin, but IT, sometimes HR, all the administrative support. And all 3 of those major functions need to be strong. And but then we tailor it because marketing might be separate from sales. So maybe it's marketing, sales, ops, and finance, or maybe HR is up on the team and we have a really strong people component and we need culture in the room and their voice needs to be in our weekly meetings and so forth. Or maybe we're becoming an IT firm that just happens to do HVAC installation or whatever it is. So I've seen IT up there being a strong voice strategically for the leadership team. So there's no right or wrong. It's what's right for the business owner right now. And we say, let's look forward 6 to 12 months and just talk structure, no names. What's the right structure for this business in the next 6 to 12 months? And that structure will evolve. Typically the V and the I, Vic and Eileen of the book you referenced that Gino and Mike Payton wrote, Get a Grip, are always there. And if they can be separate roles, we call that rocket fuel. And the leadership team, the functional leaders reporting that integrator might evolve, might change. And, I think it's Ford Motor Company. I think under one leader, they had 3, Bill Ford Jr., and then under Jack Nasser had like 12. And there's no right or wrong. Same company, different time periods. And that's what Jack Nasser needed and so forth. So, but in a small entrepreneurial company, we suggest that team size and then kind of think about functions, what voices need to be weighing in. And these need to be leaders. These leaders are the voice of their department. And if they can't solve the issue with their department, they need to bring it up to the leadership team and help the leadership team's brains weigh in on getting it solved too. So
so now you got this leadership team and you're like, okay, now I've exposed, my P&L. Okay. And, now you're exposed and you're like, okay, I want to go from, a $5 million firm, $1 million firm, whatever it is, 20 million to 40 million, 20 million. You want to go 10X. 10X is the big conversation out here, right? You want to go from 20 million to 200 million. Now, you've got this team and going from 20 to 200, you have to be a different firm than got you to 20 million. When you design a comp plan for this core team and also for your other supporting people, you have to, my question to you is, there's short-term incentive, quarter or 6 month or, annual, but how much of a really good bonus structure or, profit bonus structure, profit share is tied to a long-term incentive plan also? Because you want to retain these really great people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I work with companies that might be employee owned, like an ESOP. And I see the ESOP, which is essentially a retirement plan. I don't design those or weigh in on those, but I love those businesses because they tend to have very open cultures and they're trying to build employee kind of ownership thinking.
Right. And a whole bunch of profits are going into that ESOP. So like they're getting rewarded on that in long term.
Yeah, and in an ESOP environment, if an ESOP is a long-term incentive, as an example, which is good for retention, they retain employees at like a 200% better rate than companies that are traditional. So that and there's lots of data with the NCEO and the ESOP Association. NCEO is National Center for Employee Ownership, but there's lots of great data that talks about that. It's not for everybody, but it's a nice exit strategy where you take some chips off the table and get the culture kind of really. Think of the word sort of hydrated, but it's like everybody's engaged, right? And so our role in that might be to design a short-term plan that's a 1 year. It's a template, essentially a formula, but each year you're going to update the formula slightly, where you might cap the plan, because in an ESOP you're playing the long game, where you don't want to be sucking all the profits out and paying it every year. We're trying to balance between keeping our heads in the game on the short term, but also funding and paying down the debt for the ESOP and so forth over the longer term. So companies might cap the plan at X% of wages. Sometimes it's like 15% of wages. That's going to be our nut. And if we hit this, we get 5%. This is 10%. But once we hit, it's a point of diminishing returns, and we just cap it. So we know it's almost helps you budget better as well. And that's a great way to balance long-term and short-term thinking, because most employees are thinking day-to-day, week-to-week. And if we can start to have them look out quarter to quarter and year to year, it's going to be helpful for them thinking and acting like owners. So that's one example of balancing. And I've seen SARs, stock appreciation rights, for key leaders in an organization. And those are typically based on increase in value over a set baseline year to year. And it's usually like 7 years. There's payouts, but it helps retention for like key employees. We don't design those, but there are plenty of organizations that do. And we really focus on that incentive plan that's based on the P&L, whereas that might be focused more on a balance sheet, which is good. I don't suggest any of these are wrong. It's just there's 100 ways to shape employee behavior.
Right. And in like employee retention, is something that most people really want. The more consistency that you have with a great team, the better you guys can go. But you also, if you're going from 20 million to 200 million, you're going to outgrow a lot of people too. So you don't want to necessarily bind yourself to, oh, I made a deal and now I got to get rid of you because you're hindering our growth. Like you're not doing the work. I got to demote you, right? Or whatever it is. So like these are complex situations that we run into.
It is true. Referring back to our accountability chart conversation we just had, that's why the leadership team should really be looking at structure. Is this the right structure to get us to the next level? And don't look out 10 years or the 10X, but know that structure is going to evolve in the seat. And each seat on that leadership team, we're going to make sure the person who's in that seat really gets it. They want it and they have the capacity to do it. And as you pointed out, the Peter principle can leak in there where the company outgrows the individual. And so caution on incentives that are tied to the seat, if that might be, those should be, I think, metered out in a very conservative way, like those long-term retention bonuses, setups that you might have. And but you're trying to keep their heads in the game. My experience is that employees can begin to enroll, even in a traditional non-ESOP environment, in the longer term vision that's on the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer, just through repeated communication by leadership on this is where we are, this is where we've been, this is where we're going, and get everybody excited and rallied for 3 years. And then I think what's missing often is a link between, if I'm an employee, I know what I do every day, and I hear you telling me all about this vision stuff, but I don't feel connected to it. And how do we create a stronger link between my daily activities and the company's performance? And that requires some really good leadership and good training. So it's repetitive. You have to do it 7 times. We say for people to hear it for the first time, you can't just tell them once, they'll forget. And so it has to be part of the drumbeat of your state of the company meetings or the regular communication. So you're reinforcing what you said before, and it helps build credibility for your message as a leader as you go forward. So the employees start to link their, oh, I see how mistakes add up to, lower profit. Let's figure out a way. Let's set up a rock or a challenge rock and have some fun and reduce mistakes or rework or overtime or whatever it is, some measurable that's out of whack. AR over 60, get it down so that we can start to pay down some debt and reduce our interest expense or so forth. So you get them sort of thinking like that. That's really fun.
Yeah. You got my brain like really going in a lot of different directions at the moment. But one of the things that what I see often in heavily sales oriented organizations, right, where sell, the support team is often sitting here like, well, I have no impact on the sale. And my position always is you actually have the most impact because you're the person that's really, once it's sold, you're the one that's going to implement it. If sales has to get back into the conversation, now we're reselling. Now we're actually doing things that is actually hurting our profitability. And when they get to see that, it's like, oh yeah, I am an integral part in this thing. And then I'm going to get a reward based upon this, which I really was like, I think the employees hate arbitrary. Like I got a bonus for what? Like
Right.
Wall Street does it. Everybody does it. And it's like, I'm not really sure why I got a bonus.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And oftentimes folks will ask us, clients will ask us, should we include our sales team in this incentive? It's like, absolutely. I mean, the sales teams generally have commissions. They might have base plus commission or 100% commission, whatever. That's their me comp. That's for the seat, for closing deals and high margins and so forth, and selling alternative products and services, and building that customer retention. That's their job. The profit sharing plan we're talking about is we comp. That's for company, and we're all one company, one voice, one operating system, one vision, one 10-year target, so forth, one language. And so I'd like everybody to participate. They might not all participate at the same levels,
Right.
but we want sales teams to be gathering enough information about the project that they pass it on to the delivery folks without a lot of.
Then that would really incentivize, like I hear this often from business owners. It's like, oh, Joe is selling a lot, but he keeps cutting the sale down to get the sale, but we're not making any money. And I'm paying out commissions on it. And we're like actually getting to the point where we're almost going to lose money. We have one cost overrun and we're gone. And it's like, okay, Joe, yes, you are getting the sales, but we don't like your sales. We'd be better off not doing your sales.
Yeah.
Now it's like, how do I, if I have a back end, okay, you got your commission for the sale, but if I have a back end for profitability on the back end of that, oh, there's another sweetener in there. And it's almost like you need to, like, as you redesign the way you think, like you want your salespeople to be on the profitability side and on the mindset more so than on just straight comp.
I'm totally with you. And what we're trying to do is evolve people from me, which is important, but this little world of me to we. And so if a salesperson is thinking about gross margin, not just their commission, they're thinking about some things that are bigger than that. Now, my experience is if a company takes better care of the we, if they have 100 people and the 100 people are just lockstep and climbing up that mountain, they're absolutely going to be able to take individually better care of the me. So we is sort of higher up the ladder, and it's hard for people to shift there because you've got the whole the lizard brain, right? It's like we're historically wired to protect ourselves and want safety. And so we're always looking about how am I getting screwed, or how am I going to win? And it's all about me. But we're trying to say, open it up a little bit. Let's talk about we are one community in our little company of 100 people. And if we take care of this thing, we got job security, we got better technologies and tools to invest in, and the latest tech and software and all that. And we could start to look at acquisitions, and all those things create opportunities for growth for you to make more money or move into leadership position or whatever it is you want to do. And so we leads to better me stuff. So
yeah, that
I think that's really.
I think that I think what I'm hearing and what I've seen be executed on a lot of strategies is that when you properly organize the the core, you know, team, and then you create an incentive plan, and then that division now basically says, okay, we have an incentive, you know, maybe that division head has a better incentive plan, but underneath them, maybe there's 5 or 6 people in that department. There's a specifically designed profit plan for those people. And it's like, okay, we got to run with this because this is going to allow the other team to do what they're doing. And if that team doesn't do what they're doing, so now it's like, we're not against each other. We're now for each other. We're now back into that we and out of me, because I can't succeed without we.
Good point, because if you just design incentives per department, you can pit departments against each other where it's we, but it's we little department, right? And they're going to hoard the resources or the tools or the equipment or the people or whatever, because they want to figure out a way to get their bonus. So if you have a multi-location setup, for example, oftentimes we're designing a plan where there is a we component for company-wide. It might be, I don't know, 30% of the incentive, and then 70% is for that location. But we want the locations to play nice and share resources, and to help them see that, that bigger picture of, like, we are one company, even though you guys are over here in, Boston, and you guys are over here in Atlanta or something. And then come together to kind of keep exposing them to the larger picture. So, but you're right. So, but caution on just doing departmental, because then you can pit folks to get against each other, just from a psychology standpoint.
In your, from your experience in working with so many different firms and different, from the ProfitWorks side and the EOS side, as as you look at this, what do you see the most successful elements of companies designing? Like, what is the change, and how do people really, like, what are some of the shining examples of just like, we got to this VTO, vision, traction, etc.?
So lots of stories come to mind. The overarching theme that I see is that the companies that really have the best success, the exponential success, tend to have and state higher expectations of performance. And so they do that in a lot of different ways. But one is, they're shooting for a BHAG, right? And they've got, there was a restaurant equipper I started working with probably 10 or 11 years ago on EOS, and they were maybe less than 20 million in sales, and they put on their BHAG to be 60 million by 2020, and they surpassed that. They went ESOP, and it's just been a real success story. But they started to just get scorecards into the different departments. They started having very sort of disciplined meetings. We say in EOS, start on time, end on time, same agenda, put issues on the list, discuss, healthy team. And they start to solve issues and get their raw completion rates up and that kind of thing. And so it just became a very engaged group of employees, and began to do acquisitions and partnerships and joint ventures and that kind of thing. So it became a really fun story or example of seeing somebody just blow their target out of the water, and then they set a new one for 200 million, and by 2030. So they're on track for that. So it's an exciting way to see companies maneuver through all the ups and downs of what's going on in the economy. In a sort of a smaller ecosystem, medical supply distributor, maybe 50 million down in Florida. And distributors, that low margin business, right? But really loved the idea of this sort of ownership mindset for their employees. And they tackled lots of little measurables with challenge rocks and these little games, quarterly games, to try to create improvement for, like, getting more web sales or getting sponsors for their catalog, or moving to paperless from paper, and all these different things. And all these little dollars add up to funding that bottom line. In 3 quarters, they put about $225,000 to the bottom line. It was just found money through an actively engaged workforce. So it was like employees' eyes open up to, oh, yeah, I can do that differently. I can do that better. I didn't realize that had a ripple effect for us. And there's just more office furniture distributors and like the asphalt paving company and pest control companies and IT staffing firms. And so it really is fun to see and to participate in the progress. Those leadership teams are making tough decisions and they're making good people moves. That's a big one, John, for pace. In the companies where they come in every 90 days and we put, Kurt in safety on the issues list quarter after quarter, and he's just a jerk and, we still got him. And they're plodding along. And so my passionate plea is make good people moves. And it might be lateral. It might be somebody has to exit. It might be bringing somebody in, not just the leadership team, but into the organization that helps you. You win with people, right? But it helps you get that human energy aligned and disciplined and accountable. And so use the EOS tools and state those expectations and then hold people accountable to achieving them. It's a lot more fun because it's a long journey. And we as entrepreneurs and businesses are in for that long haul. So it should be enjoyable as you watch your balance sheet move in the right direction. So those are some stories. There are a lot more though. In the books too. Both books have different stories in there, lots of examples. So hopefully it's inspiring for your listeners.
I think it is. So for the listeners, how should people get started? Like, what's the best way to get engaged with you or get how should they start?
Sure. So a couple of ideas. I know data is showing entrepreneurs are not big book readers. Now they are book listeners though. So, and if you're like me, I can take in a book on Audible pretty quickly to sit down. I got probably 15 books halfway through, right?
Yep. I got a stack of them everywhere. Started reading that, 20 pages in that one. Yep.
That's right. And you're like, oh, I haven't read this in a while. But if you're not running an EOS, my strong suggestion is read Traction by Gino Wickman. And he wrote that back in 2007, I think was the first draft and then republished. But it's fantastic, fairly timeless book. And that'll get you started on EOS. There are implementers. There are about 825 of us around the world. And so, and you could certainly send me an email. I can find somebody for you wherever you are. But the best way to reach me, stretchnotsnap.com is one, alexfreytag.com, ProfitWorks LLC.com. They all kind of point to the same place. And I'm happy to help or have a conversation in any way on that.
LinkedIn, all those social media platforms, right?
That's right. Got to stay out there, stay relevant. But if I can help in any way, honestly, I love helping entrepreneurs. And if you're running an EOS, and this is where you mentioned Get a Grip, and then Stretch Not Snap is sort of the sequel or the follow-up to Get a Grip. Vic and Eileen are running on EOS in Stretch Not Snap and want to engage the workforce and develop this company of ownership thinkers. That is starting with perhaps send us an email, but go to stretchnotsnap.com and we can start that conversation. There are a lot of different ways to enter that, but working with you and the perhaps finance person, the integrator, to start to establish what we call the no entitlement incentive plan. And that's kind of done over Zoom and back and forth and gathering some data and helping you think through the threshold and the percentage share for that incentive plan. How often are we going to pay it out? All the design elements of that. And then once we get that thing kind of solidified, let's roll it out. Let's do some training and teach everybody. And so that's sort of our two-step process: design the plan and then create some business literacy, some financial acumen for the folks who are going to be involved in that incentive plan.
And then get some really good feedback. See if your team has responded or they're confused by it, and then modify and adjust it to make it get what you want. Because ultimately, as a business owner, you can't get what you want without a great team to take you to the next level. You might have a lightning bolt, you might have something really, really cool, but you need a team. And you need this team to be here for the long run. You need that consistency. This is going to help you do that.
They're your who's, right? As Dan would say, your who's to help you get what you want out of the business.
We know how to do it. We just need a who to sit there and do it. That's what you need. That's right. Yeah, that's right. I love it.
I would ask your employees is if you're just going to dip a toe in and say, just whatever your revenues are, say, hey, we do X in revenues. What % of that do you think is profit? and then let them answer. Just see where because a lot of them just don't know. They've never been taught it. It's not because they're dumb. It's not taught in schools and so forth. So we have an opportunity to open their eyes to that the risk that's involved for us. So
yeah, this was an amazing conversation. I truly appreciate your time today. I really want this. I want people to engage. I want people to get what they want out of their businesses. You became a business owner for a reason, and, get focused on what you want and put a team around you, and that team will support in getting what you want. Love this.
Yeah. Tap into their brains. They've got extra capacity and potential, and just give them context with some basic business understanding. So
Love it.
Thank you again, John.
Yeah. And I'll see you soon. And this was great. Thank you.